Oh, it's tricky. Showing appreciation for writers, performers, is actually supportive for us. And also showing that you agree with the idea that people should be rewarded for doing good work. You know, it was just years ago I was involved with a video game union strike. And the real big reason that these video game companies did not want to even introduce the concept of rewarding the performers who helped them make $650 million in a weekend was, well, if we have to pay the actors, shouldn't we be paying the technological people who work 22 hours a day? And we sure as hell don't want to pay all those guys. All the money stays in our pockets. So it's just greed. Yes, if you want to celebrate creativity and the way that great work affects us as viewers or whatever, that's fine. And if we want to call out these people for greed, that helps too. I'm a big fanboy because I grew up back in the day. Nowadays, they use the term blurred, black nerds. Back in the day, that wasn't a thing. You could be black or a nerd. Phil, why are you in the corner reading all that white stuff? But now, we can all enjoy anything. And I'm a big fanboy. Although, weirdly, most of my fandoms have been people I did parodies of. Not people I met. You know, I played Sidney Poitier, Sammy Davis Jr. And I would have dreamed to meet any of those guys. Although, I have actually been fortunate in my career to touch base with people who were absolutely foundational in building my life as a person enjoying. I got to work with Carol Burnett. I got to work with John Travolta. And those were huge. But I'm also a big comic book fan, which is pretty much at least half the reason I do Comic-Cons. One half is to get to meet fans, and the other half is to be a fan. And I bring my sketchbook, and I go to Artist Alley, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm at Neil Adams, I'm at John Byrne. People who created the comic books that have been in my head since I was 10. The first thing I say to anybody is always that voice acting is a misnomer, because the acting comes before the voice. It's not just about having a funny sound. It's about making a character real. But there is a sort of a trick to it, because just being able to act doesn't necessarily make you a great voice actor. I remember back in the day when we were doing Justice League in the early 2000s, they would bring in amazing on-camera actors. And not all of them could do it. Because the thing is, most people, when you are reading words off a page, you lose all feeling. It's just eyes to mouth. But you need to be able to be conscious of how to express things vocally. And that's why a lot of people with a singing background, like Ray Delisle, become amazing voice actors, because they have an understanding of what the sounds that come out of them do to people's ears. How do I get the feeling of this arrogant character to these people? Maybe I give him this sound. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have warned y'all. I don't do no short answers. That's all come back. I can't post this. World record. It's actually not about the medium of performance as much as about the quality of the material and the genius of your collaborators. Because, especially in voiceover, as a voice actor, you are at most a third of that character. Because without the writing and the character design, it's not full, it's not real. On camera, you bring more. You bring the voice, the feel, the expression, and the look of the character. But You need the direction and the writing to help you really bring it to. When you get to work with somebody like Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator of Samurai Jack, that is as amazing as getting to work with Quentin Tarantino. It's not about one of those is easier than the other. Both of those people will make you a great actor.
What about not as easy or hard, but joyful? Do you find either more joyful?
I'm sure you've all heard Hollywood stories, and there is definitely not a direct correlation between I had a great shoot and it became Titanic. How much you enjoy something doesn't necessarily make it. I've done some really great, I did a movie with Catherine O'Hara and Bill Murray, which was a fantastic experience to be able to share a set with those geniuses. That movie never came out. So, I mean, enjoyment does not necessarily correlate with success, but it does correlate with, the best memories.
Thank you.
To me, the actor's nightmare is you do a 6-month shoot in Taiwan where you have dysentery for most of the time. Your wife has a baby, you get to miss it, and then you broke your finger on the last day. So it's just a nightmare. And then that movie becomes the biggest movie of all time, and you spend the rest of your life having people remind you of the worst 6 months of your life. Hey, you're that guy from the... That's a very interesting question, because actually earlier this year I did a talk to an organization that my daughter began at her high school, an organization called Bridge: Belonging, Representation, Identity, Diversity, Grounded in Equity. And they asked me to do a talk about identity in entertainment. And so I told these teenage kids, it's like, well, you guys know what the problems are in terms of diversity and equity and representation, but let me tell you how things have shifted. And I started out telling them about the first black movie star was Lincoln Perry doing Step and Fetch It. The only way back then a black dude could get respect in Hollywood was to be a living stereotype. It's like, okay, yeah, that guy's all right. Yeah, give him another job. He can buy a fancy car now. It's like, yeah, but because he does that, none of these other brothers can. And I talked to them how we moved from that, even though Hattie McDaniel was the first black woman to win an Oscar. And we respect her. She was really talented. But if you think about it, they gave her an Oscar for playing a stereotype.
She wasn't allowed to be there either.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, yeah, black mammy. But to me, the turning point was Sidney Poitier. Because he was the first black movie star in mainstream entertainment. And he did not play any stereotypes. He played a completely different image of African Americans: nobility, intelligence, authority. And wow, I'd only seen white people play those kind of characters before. But Sidney opened up this world, opened it up not just to black people watching him on screen, but he opened it up to everybody. It's like, oh, yeah, because white people came to his movies too. Everybody did. Everybody recognized it as quality, not just color. And we've been slowly moving forward. It's funny, I remember back in the 80s, a bunch of young black actors in Hollywood, we would all sit around talking about, it's like, yeah, I gotta go off another gangster part. Yeah, me too, man. Yeah, so, well, you always gotta play a thug. That's the only way you get a job. It's like, yeah, but I try to ground it in reality, make it a real person, not just... But then, in the early 2000s, I worked on this web series. One of the Zucker brothers from the Airplane movies did a parody of a soap opera set in a fundamentalist Islamic community. He called it Sands of Passion. And the majority of the actors on that show were of Middle Eastern descent. And I heard them having the same conversation we'd had in the 80s, but about playing terrorists. Mm-hmm. But now, 20 years later, you have Ms. Marvel, you have Rami. So we have moved forward. Like, there are Middle Eastern actors aren't just playing thugs, terrorists. They're playing heroes and telling all kinds of stories from their experience, just like the way Sidney Poitier did for us. The biggest issue of diversity and representation isn't on screen, it's in the decision-making rooms.
Mm-hmm.
You need the people who do the casting, who greenlight the projects, to understand the value of representation and diversity, and to want to share space and equity and storytelling, and not just do, this is just what I know. It's like, no, spread that out, share it. So when you have, and I'm not saying just skin diversity, it's thought diversity.